What would you do if the woman you once abandoned showed up at your mother's funeral, with twin daughters who looked exactly like you? The rain hadn't stopped all morning. It drummed steadily on the stained glass windows of St. Catherine's Cathedral. Casting fractured rainbows across the pews, Jack Callahan stood stiffly at the front of the church, tall and composed in his black suit, but his eyes were empty. He didn't hear the funeral director's voice. He barely registered the whispers of condolences or the scent of lilies that filled the air. His mother, Margaret Callahan, was gone. The woman who raised him alone, who believed in him when no one else did. The only person who ever saw past his ambition to the little boy who once promised her he'd make something of himself. Now he had. He was Jack Callahan, a titan of industry, tech entrepreneur, real estate mogul, and one of Forbes's golden names. But standing there in that cathedral, surrounded by people in expensive coats and empty platitudes, all his millions felt like pocket change. Worthless. Until he saw her. She was hiding. Not obviously, but enough to make him wonder if she ever intended to be seen, tucked near the back, just behind a marble pillar, wearing a simple black dress that somehow made her more striking than any of the designer gowns nearby. Ava Carter. The name hit him like a punch. The woman he had once loved beyond reason. The one who left 5 years ago without a word, and standing on either side of her were 2 little girls. At first, Jack's mind couldn't make sense of it. But then he saw their eyes. Hazel. Not just similar, identical to his, that rare golden green shade that ran in his family, passed down from Margaret herself. He stopped breathing. Time slowed, the church, the people, the rain, all of it faded into nothing as he stared at the 2 girls clutching Ava's hands. His children. Ava turned, their eyes locked, and in that moment the air between them thickened with everything left unsaid, everything broken. Her face went pale. She grabbed the girls and bolted toward the side exit. Jack moved, almost without thinking. He pushed through mourners, barely registering their surprised glances as he muttered apologies. But by the time he reached the massive oak doors, they were gone. Outside, the storm greeted him like a slap. Cold, relentless. He spotted a silver Honda peeling out of the parking lot, its taillights disappearing into the grey mist. And just like that, so did they. "Mr. Callahan," a voice said behind him. It was Tyler Green, his assistant, holding an umbrella. "The service isn't finished. People are asking—" "Handle it," Jack muttered. "Make my apologies. Family emergency." Tyler blinked. In all his years working for Jack, he'd never seen him rattled. But Jack didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked into the rain, heart pounding, mind spiraling. Family, his family. Back at his penthouse, Jack couldn't sit still. The image of those little girls haunted him. The familiar tilt of their heads, the way they held Ava's hands, the shape of their smiles, Emily and Grace. He didn't know their names yet, but he knew with terrifying certainty that they were his. He thought about Ava. She'd been everything his world wasn't. Soft where he was sharp, present where he was distracted. She'd loved him before the jets, the luxury offices, the headlines. Loved him when his only assets were a second-hand laptop and a heart full of dreams. But he hadn't chosen her. Not really. 5 years ago, she got accepted into a PhD program in Seattle, a full scholarship. He asked her to stay. She asked him to come with her or try long distance. He refused, too focused on building Callahan Global, too addicted to success. The last thing she ever said to him echoed now like thunder in his chest. Success without love is just expensive loneliness. And now that loneliness had a name. 2 names, 2 faces, 2 daughters he never knew. Jack didn't sleep. By morning, he had Logan Pierce, a private investigator and former FBI agent, working the case. Start with Ava Carter, Columbia grad psychology. She left New York 5 years ago. Understood, Logan replied. If she's out there, I'll find her. Within 48 hours, he had results, but they weren't what Jack expected. She's been living in Seattle. Went by her married name, Ava Chen. Husband, Dr. Michael Chen, pediatric surgeon. Died 18 months ago in a car accident. Jack's breath caught. Married, widowed, raising his children. Alone. He stared at the photo Logan had pulled. Ava in a modest neighborhood, holding hands with 2 girls. His girls. She looked tired, strong, and deeply protective. He knew that look. Margaret wore it often, back when she worked 2 jobs and still made time to read to him at night. Jack closed the folder. His voice was low, but firm. Book the jet. I'm going to Seattle. The jet touched down in Seattle just past noon. Jack Callahan stared out the window at the grey sky, the rain streaking across the glass like the thoughts racing through his mind. It had been less than 3 days since he saw Ava Carter at his mother's funeral. Less than 3 days since he discovered that he had not 1, but 2 daughters. And now, he was here, not as the CEO of Callahan Global, but as a man chasing the truth. A modest 2-bedroom house. That's where Logan Pierce's file said Ava lived now. In a quiet Seattle neighborhood called Wallingford, Jack sat in a black rental SUV across the street, staring at the small home tucked behind a white picket fence. It was ordinary. Not the kind of place you'd expect the woman who once stood by a future billionaire to end up in. But it was perfect in a way he hadn't expected. A tire swing on the old oak in the yard, sidewalk chalk drawings on the concrete path, and a small flower bed that looked lovingly maintained. It wasn't wealth. It was home. And it made Jack's penthouse feel like a museum exhibit by comparison. Through the front window, he saw a flash of movement. Then 2 small figures raced across the living room, giggling, their voices cut through the glass and the rain like music. He watched, heart pounding, as Ava appeared behind them, wiping flour off her hands and tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She looked tired, strong older, and more beautiful than ever. For a moment, Jack almost turned the key and drove away. But instead, he opened the door and stepped out into the drizzle, walked up the path, and knocked. The door opened a few inches. One of the girls stood there, maybe 4, maybe 5, wearing a pink tutu over jeans, paint smudges on her cheeks, and wide hazel eyes that mirrored his own. "Mommy, there's a man!" The words were innocent, curious, but Jack felt them like a punch to the chest. Ava appeared behind her daughter, holding a dish towel in one hand, surprise freezing her in place. Their eyes locked. 5 years collapsed between them in an instant. She didn't slam the door. She didn't welcome him in either. She stepped out, closed the door behind her and crossed her arms. "How did you find us?" Jack's voice was quiet. "You already know the answer." She exhaled sharply. "I guess I do." There was a long silence. Rain tapped lightly against the porch railings. Jack finally spoke. "Those girls. They're mine, aren't they?" Ava flinched, her composure cracking. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded once. "Yes." Just one word, but it hit like a tsunami. They sat on the porch beneath the awning, rain falling steadily around them. Jack didn't speak at first. He was still trying to breathe through what he'd just heard. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked. Ava's fingers curled into her lap. "Because I was scared. Because I didn't trust you to choose them." Jack blinked. "You didn't trust me to be a father." "I didn't trust you to be present," she corrected softly. "Back then, you were married to your company. You barely had time for me. How was I supposed to believe you'd have time for 2 newborns?" Jack looked down. She was right. The man he was 5 years ago had no room for bedtime stories or scraped knees, only boardrooms and market reports. I would have done the right thing, he said, more to himself than to her. Ava's voice was firm. You would have hired a full-time nanny and said that counted. Jack didn't argue, because she was right again. She opened the door briefly and called to the girls. Emily, Grace, go wash up, Mommy's talking. Emily, Grace. Hearing their names for the first time nearly broke him. When the door shut again, Jack swallowed hard. I want to know them. Please, Ava. I'm not here to fight, I need to meet them. She looked at him long and hard. 5 minutes. That's all you get. Inside, the house was chaos, in the best way. Toy bins tucked under tables, drawings taped to the fridge. The smell of warm cookies and lavender hand soap. It smelled like childhood, like the life he never had growing up, and the one he never got to give. The girls appeared in matching unicorn pajamas. Ava knelt. Girls, this is Mr. Callahan. He was Mommy's friend a long time ago. Emily tilted her head. Before Daddy Michael? Jack froze. Michael, the husband, the man who raised them. Ava nodded. Yes, sweetheart, before him. Grace stepped closer. You have eyes like ours. Then, the thunderclap. Are you our real daddy? Jack's knees almost buckled. He crouched, trying to find his breath, then looked Ava in the eye. She gave a small nod. He looked back at the girls. That's a big question. What do you think? Emily said, You look like us. Mommy cries sometimes when she thinks we're asleep. Grace added, She says we remind her of someone special. Jack's eyes burned. You're both very smart, he whispered. And very loved. Time's up, Ava said, but her voice trembled. Girls, go brush your teeth. Emily hesitated. Will we see you again? Jack glanced at Ava. She didn't answer, so he did. I hope so. I really hope so. After the girls left, Jack stood in the kitchen, the warmth of the visit already fading like a dream. Ava leaned on the counter. You can't just drop in and expect everything to be fine. They're not a deal to be closed. Jack nodded. I know. Being a father isn't easy, she continued. It's being there for tantrums, for school plays, for the hard stuff. Then teach me, Jack said simply. Let me try. Ava stared at him. And if you fail again, I won't. Why not? Because I buried my mother 3 days ago, Ava. She died never knowing she had granddaughters. And because losing you once was the worst mistake of my life. 5 minutes had turned into 30. And as Jack walked to his car that night, Ava stood in the doorway watching him. There was no promise, no miracle moment. But there was hope. A flicker of something in her eyes that told him, this wasn't over. Not yet. It started with coffee and muffins. Every morning, for the next week, Jack Callahan showed up at Ava Carter's doorstep at exactly 7:45 a.m., holding a brown paper bag from the neighborhood bakery and 2 lattes, one with oat milk, just the way she used to like it. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't ask to see the girls. He just stood there, said good morning, handed her the bag, and left. By Thursday, Ava didn't shut the door right away. By Saturday, she invited him in for 10 minutes while Emily and Grace finished their cartoons. And by the following Tuesday, the girls asked if Mr. Jack could stay for breakfast. Jack never tried to rush anything. He sat quietly at the kitchen table while Ava packed lunches. He listened as the girls argued about who got the pink spoon and who had the better drawing on the fridge. He asked about school, and when they talked, he really listened. It was so different from the world he knew. In boardrooms, silence was strategy. Here, silence was just the space between crayons and cereal bowls, and somehow, it felt holy. He watched Grace twirl her hair when she was thinking, watched Emily furrow her brow like a little general when her toast was cut the wrong way. He didn't try to take up space. He just tried to be there. And that, it turned out, made all the difference. That Friday, Ava found herself leaning against the doorframe as Jack sat cross-legged on the living room floor, letting the girls stick glitter stars on his face. "You know," she said, amused, "the Jack I used to know would never let anyone near him with glitter." Jack grinned without looking up. "The Jack you used to know didn't know what he was missing." Grace leaned over and carefully pressed a purple star to his forehead. "You're a unicorn now," she declared solemnly. Jack gave a mock salute. "It's an honor." Ava laughed. Really laughed. The sound surprised even her. Later that night, after the girls were in bed, Jack helped clean up the playroom. Crayons rolled across the floor. Sticker books were stacked in uneven towers. "I don't know how you do it all," he said quietly. "Work, parenting, bedtime routines." Ava shrugged, wiping jelly from the side of the table. "You don't have a choice when you're the only one left." There was no bitterness in her voice. Just reality. Jack watched her for a long moment. "Let me help. Not just with glitter and puzzles. With life." Ava hesitated. "Help? How?" "However you need," he said. "Grocery runs, school drop-offs." "Just say the word." Ava studied him. "Why are you really here, Jack?" He met her eyes. "Because I want to be their father. And I want to be the kind of man who deserves a second chance." The next day, he showed up not with muffins, but with a box of second-hand books and a toolbox. "I saw the girl's bookshelf was leaning," he explained, kneeling beside the wall. "Thought I'd fix it before it falls over." He ended up staying an hour. Then 2. Then, at Ava's invitation, joined them for lunch. It became routine. Mondays, soccer practice with Emily. Tuesdays, grocery runs with Grace. Wednesdays, taco night, Jack brought the guac. Thursdays, help with homework at the kitchen table. Fridays, movie night, complete with popcorn and snuggles. Week by week, the rhythms of their life changed, not all at once, but like the slow turning of seasons. Ava didn't say much, but she watched everything. Watched Jack carry a sleeping Grace from the couch to her bed. Watched him sit in the back row at Emily's soccer game, cheering louder than anyone. Watched him patch the garden fence without being asked. And slowly, the wall inside her began to crack. One rainy Thursday, Ava came home late from work. The house was quiet. Jack had picked up the girls, made dinner, cleaned up, and was now reading Goodnight Moon in a soft, steady voice while the twins lay curled on the couch under a blanket. Ava stood silently in the doorway and listened. Good night, stars. Good night, air. Good night, noises everywhere. When he finished, the girls were half asleep. He kissed each of their foreheads, then whispered, "I love you." Ava felt her throat tighten. She hadn't heard those words from a man in years, and certainly not said like that, with no expectation, just truth. When he turned and saw her, he froze, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to," but she shook her head. "It's okay." A long silence. Then she whispered, "They love you too, you know." Jack's eyes filled, and he nodded once, not trusting himself to speak. That weekend, Jack was invited to his first real family moment. Emily and Grace had begged Ava to let him come to the school play. Emily was dancing flower number 4. Grace was on leaf duty. Jack arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in a cardigan and jeans, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Ava watched from the passenger seat of his car as he sat quietly, reading the program like it was a Broadway ticket. "Why do you look more nervous than the kids?" she teased. "Because this matters more than anything I've ever done." Emily spotted him in the audience during her performance and broke from the choreography to wave enthusiastically. The other kids kept dancing. She stood there, beaming, until Ava gently coaxed her back into the routine. Afterward, Grace led him by the hand into the cafeteria and pointed to the table where she'd saved him a cookie. "This one has more chocolate chips. I picked it for you." Jack's voice caught as he said,
Best cookie I've ever had. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Ava found Jack sitting on the back steps, looking out over the rain-drenched yard. "You've changed," she said softly. Jack turned. "I had to," Ava joined him. "But how do I know it's real? That you won't disappear when life gets messy?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because I'm already here, and I'm not going anywhere." She didn't answer with words. Instead, she rested her head on his shoulder. And for the first time in years, Jack Callahan let himself believe he could belong, not just in their lives, but in their hearts. It was supposed to be just another Thursday. Ava Carter had a full schedule at the community center. Emily had a vocabulary quiz. Grace was working on her finger-painting masterpiece. Jack was supposed to pick up the girls from school and meet Ava at home by 6. But by 3:12 p.m., everything unraveled. Ava was mid-session with a parent when her phone buzzed. She glanced down, expecting to see a reminder or maybe a text from Jack asking if the girls could have a second popsicle. But the screen read, "King County Jail, inmate call." Her stomach dropped. She fumbled to excuse herself, heart racing as she accepted the call. "Ava, it's me." Jack's voice was low, shaken. "I need you to listen carefully. I've been arrested." Arrested. The word didn't make sense. Not in the world they had rebuilt, not with the man who now spent his days learning how to braid hair and burn pancakes shaped like hearts. "What? What are you talking about?" Ava whispered. "What happened?" Jack's voice cracked. "They're charging me with securities fraud, embezzlement. They say I manipulated investor accounts. That I moved money offshore." Ava leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe. "Is it true?" There was a long pause on the line. Then Jack said the worst thing imaginable. "Some of it is, but it's not what you think." The drive to the jail was a blur. Ava's hands shook on the wheel. Her thoughts spun in every direction. By the time she reached the sterile visitation room, she felt like the floor beneath her life had cracked wide open. Jack looked different behind the glass. No tailored suit. No confidence. Just a man who had finally hit bottom. "I made mistakes, Ava," he admitted, voice raw. "Back when I was first building Callahan Global, I cut corners, took shortcuts I thought I could fix later, but I never did." Ava stared at him through the glass, expression unreadable. "You lied to me." Jack shook his head slowly. "No, I didn't lie. Not about the past few months, not about you, or the girls. Everything I've done lately, that's been real. The man you've seen, that's who I want to be." "But you're not him," she said quietly. "Not really. Because now I have to explain to my daughters why the father they just learned to love is in jail." Her voice broke. "You said you were here to stay, Jack. But now you're gone again." That night, Ava sat at the kitchen table, her hands folded tightly in front of her. Emily and Grace looked at her with wide, trusting eyes. "Is Daddy Jack sick?" Emily asked. Emily. "No, sweetheart," Ava said softly. "But he has to go away for a while for work." "Like Daddy Michael?" Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava's heart shattered. She didn't correct them. She couldn't, because the truth was worse than anything she could explain. The media storm hit fast. Tech tycoon Jack Callahan arrested for fraud. CEO faces 20 years in prison. Family man or master manipulator? Ava turned off the news, hid the papers, silenced her phone. She went into survival mode. Again. But this time, it felt even more painful. Because this time, the man she had finally let into their lives was someone she had believed in, someone her daughters had believed in. The days blurred. Weeks passed. The girls asked fewer questions. Emily grew quiet. Grace had nightmares again. Ava went to work, cooked meals, helped with homework, and tried to forget the feel of Jack's arms around their family. But late at night, when the house was silent, She would stare at Emily's stick figure drawing still taped to the fridge, the one with 4 people holding hands in front of a little house, and she'd cry. Then, one afternoon, at the grocery store, she saw a familiar face, Logan Pierce, the private investigator who once helped Jack find her. He was pushing a cart, toddler in the seat, when he spotted Ava. "Hey," he said gently, "are you holding up?" "We're managing," she replied stiffly, expecting small talk. But Logan leaned closer. "There are things about Jack's case you need to know, things that haven't come out yet." Ava stiffened. "I don't want to hear excuses." "They're not excuses," Logan said. "They're facts. The truth is, Jack didn't act alone. And he didn't embezzle for himself." "What are you saying?" "His partner, Charles Whitmore, he was the one behind it. Offshore accounts, falsified ledgers, Jack found out too late. And when the feds closed in, Charles made sure the trail pointed straight at Jack." "That's not possible." Logan pulled out his phone. "I've been investigating. There's more emails, wire transfers, call logs, but the real kicker, Charles threatened Jack." Ava froze. "Threatened him how?" "Said he'd drag you into the case, said he'd ruin your name, dig up Ava Carter's past, expose your finances, your job, your kids. Jack had 2 options, fight and risk you, or fall on the sword." Logan handed her his phone. There on the screen was a scanned letter. Jack's handwriting. "If something happens to me, tell Ava that every choice I made was to protect her and the girls. I'd rather lose everything than let them be hurt because of my past." Ava sat down on a bench outside the store, her body shaking. He was trying to protect us." "Yes," Logan said quietly. "And now he's given up. He thinks you hate him, thinks the girls don't remember him." Ava stared at the sidewalk for a long time. "Then I need to go see him." That evening, Ava stepped into the jail again, for the first time since that terrible day. When Jack appeared behind the glass, he looked worse. Thinner, hollow, like a man waiting for the end. Then he saw her, and everything in his expression cracked. "Ava," he whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "I know everything," she said. "About Charles, about the letter, about why you didn't fight." Jack looked away, ashamed. "I thought, if I stayed quiet, you and the girls would be safe. But we're not safe without you." A long silence stretched between them. "They miss you, Jack." "Emily still sets your place at the table. Grace keeps asking if we'll visit the stars like you promised." Jack covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook with quiet sobs. "I can't do this without them, Ava. I can't do this without you." She leaned forward, placing her hand against the glass. "Then stop letting Charles win. Stop giving up. I don't know how to fight this." "You don't have to do it alone," Ava whispered. "Not anymore." The moment Ava Carter walked out of King County Jail, she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't let Jack fight this alone. Not when he had sacrificed everything, his name, his company, even his freedom, just to protect her and the girls. Not when Emily still waited at the window every night for Daddy Jack, and Grace whispered his name in her sleep. She had spent the last few weeks building walls around her heart. But now, those walls were nothing compared to what Jack was facing. It was time to fight back. That evening, Ava called Logan Pierce. "Are you serious about what you said in the store?" she asked, voice steady, despite the storm swirling inside her. Logan didn't hesitate. Every word. "Then I want in. I want to help clear Jack's name." Over the next 2 weeks, Ava stepped into a role she never imagined for herself. Amateur detective, advocate, and mother on a mission. She still worked full-time at the community center, still packed lunches, read bedtime stories, helped Emily and Grace pick out outfits with exactly the right number of sparkles. But after they were asleep, Ava sat at her kitchen table surrounded by files, printouts, and email logs that Logan shared. She studied them like puzzles, looking for patterns, connections, anything that could expose Charles Whitmore, the man who had orchestrated everything. Logan brought experience. Ava brought insight. Her background in psychology helped her read between the lines. When Charles was manipulating someone, when fear was used as leverage, when signatures and timestamps didn't match human behavior, they built timelines. They highlighted inconsistencies. They chased every wire transfer. But nothing compared to the breakthrough that came from someone unexpected. One rainy afternoon, Logan received a call from a blocked number. The voice on the other end was quiet, almost afraid. "I heard you're investigating Charles Whitmore," the woman said. "He's my ex-husband, Vanessa Whitmore." The name rang loud in Logan's files. She had divorced Charles quietly 2 years ago and had been living in hiding ever since. Ava met her in a small cafe on the outskirts of Seattle. Vanessa wore sunglasses and a hood, her hands trembling as she sipped chamomile tea. "I should have come forward sooner," she said, voice tight with guilt. "But Charles, he's dangerous when cornered. I waited too long." She reached into her purse and handed Ava a flash drive. "He keeps everything, calls emails, he records conversations. He thinks it protects him, but it's going to bury him." That night, Ava and Logan stayed up until 2 a.m., going through the drive. It was worse than they imagined. There were recordings of Charles bragging about pinning everything on Jack. Emails between Charles and offshore contacts detailing how the funds were rerouted. Memos where Charles practiced Jack's signature for forged approvals. "That lovesick fool still thinks he's protecting her," Charles sneered in one clip. "Let him rot!" "He chose the wrong war." Ava sat back in her chair, shaking. "We have him," Logan whispered. "This is enough to get the charges dropped, maybe even get him arrested." "So let's move," Ava said, "before he finds out what we've got." The next morning, they took the evidence to Danielle Brooks, Jack's new defense attorney. Danielle was smart, sharp, and relentless, the kind of lawyer who didn't waste words. After listening to 5 minutes of Charles's recordings, she looked up and said, "I can work with this." Within 48 hours, motions were filed. Court dates were set. The press got wind of the new development. Headlines shifted. Jack Callahan may have been set up by business partner. New evidence could turn fraud case upside down. Ava didn't care about the news. She only cared about one thing: getting Jack home. On a chilly Tuesday morning, she brought Emily and Grace to the courthouse. They wore matching dresses and held hands as they climbed the courthouse steps. Ava wasn't sure if it was the right decision to bring them, but Emily had insisted. "We want to be there when Daddy Jack gets free." Inside the courtroom, Jack sat beside Danielle at the defense table. He looked different now, stronger, cleaner shaven, no longer hollow. When he saw the girls in the gallery, his eyes filled instantly. Emily waved. Grace mouthed, "We love you." He pressed his hand to his chest in return. The judge entered. Helen Blake, known for being fair but firm. Danielle stood. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that directly challenges the foundation of the prosecution's case." She submitted the flash drive. The courtroom fell silent as the first recording played. Charles's voice, clear, smug, laughing. "You think they'll ever figure it out? Jack's too noble. He'll take the fall just to keep his girlfriend and those brats safe." Gasps echoed. The judge's face turned to stone. After reviewing all evidence, Judge Blake looked up. "This court finds substantial proof of misconduct, forgery, and manipulation by Charles Whitmore. All charges against Jack Callahan are hereby dismissed. Mr. Callahan, you are free to go." Emily and Grace leapt to their feet, racing past the barrier. A guard moved to stop them, but the judge raised a hand. "Let them through." Jack dropped to his knees, catching both girls in his arms as they barreled into him. "Daddy Jack." "You're back." He buried his face in their hair. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I missed you so much." Ava stood watching, her hands over her mouth, tears streaming freely. Jack looked up at her, eyes full of love and gratitude. "You did this," he mouthed. "You brought me home." Outside the courthouse, the media surged forward. Jack shielded the girls, holding them close, Ava by his side. Logan stood off to one side, arms crossed, watching the family he'd helped keep together. One reporter yelled, "Mr.
Callahan, any comment on being exonerated?" Jack looked down at Emily and Grace, then at Ava. He smiled softly. "The only thing that matters is that I get to be a father again." Everything else was never the point. The cameras were gone. The reporters had moved on to the next scandal. Charles Whitmore was behind bars, and Jack Callahan, once a headline, once a cautionary tale, was just a man with a second chance. Ava Carter didn't greet him with fireworks or declarations of love the day he walked out of court. She simply held open the door to her modest house, her daughters clinging to his hands, and said quietly, "The guest room is too small, the couch is uncomfortable, but it's all yours, if you want it." Jack stepped over the threshold like he was walking into something sacred. He wasn't home yet, but he was on his way. The first week was awkward. Jack didn't know where the cereal bowls went. He burned the toast twice. He stepped on Legos more times than he could count. Grace refused to let him comb her hair after the first tangle, and Emily gave him side eyes when he tried to sing lullabies. But he didn't give up. He learned to braid. He memorized their bedtime books. He asked questions, he listened, he showed up, and Ava watched. Not with doubt, not anymore, but with quiet, guarded hope. One afternoon, Jack took Emily to soccer practice. He stood on the sideline like the other parents, a thermos of lukewarm coffee in one hand, a camp chair in the other. He didn't take phone calls, he didn't check email, he just watched. When Emily scored her first goal, she didn't run to the coach. She didn't run to Ava, she ran to Jack. "Did you see that?" He scooped her up midair, spinning her around. "You were amazing." Ava snapped a photo from across the field. Later that night, she printed it and taped it to the refrigerator. It wasn't a milestone, it was a moment, and it meant everything. At bedtime, Grace asked the question that broke him. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" Jack knelt by her bed, took her tiny hand in his. "Every day. Even the boring ones, especially the boring ones." She studied his face like she didn't quite believe him. Then she nodded once and closed her eyes. Jack sat there, long after she'd fallen asleep. He got a small apartment nearby, just 10 minutes away, not because Ava asked him to, but because he wanted to show respect. To give her space, to show her he wasn't trying to reclaim what they had without earning it. He still came by each morning with muffins and coffee, still read bedtime stories, still kept his suitcases unpacked, in more ways than one. Ava wasn't sure when it changed. Maybe it was the day Grace skinned her knee and Jack kissed it better without hesitation. Maybe it was the night Emily had a nightmare and he was already by her side when Ava got to the room. Maybe it was the morning he sat down at the kitchen table and quietly asked, "Do you think it's too late for me to be their father? For real?" She didn't answer right away, just handed him a small stack of papers. "They're adoption forms." Jack blinked. "Only if you're serious. Only if you're staying for good." His hands shook as he took them. "I've never wanted anything more in my life." They went through the process together, slowly, briefly. Background checks, home visits, emotional readiness evaluations. Jack passed everyone. 6 weeks later, he stood in front of a family court judge, the same woman who had dismissed his case, Judge Helen Blake, and promised to love and raise Emily and Grace as his own. They ran into his arms the moment the hearing ended. He was no longer just Mr. Jack. He was Daddy Jack. Life didn't turn perfect overnight. There were tantrums and laundry piles and work emergencies.
Ava still got frustrated when Jack forgot to thaw the chicken or used 3 tablespoons of cinnamon instead of 1. But there was laughter too, and music in the kitchen, and long talks on the back porch after the girls went to sleep.
They weren't rebuilding what they had, they were building something new and stronger.
One night, while watching the girls paint rocket ships out of cardboard boxes, Ava turned to Jack. "Do you miss it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Miss what?" "Your old life." "The jet setting, the boardrooms, the magazine covers." Jack looked at Emily, who had paint on her nose, at Grace, who was taping stars to her helmet. He smiled softly. "I used to think I was building an empire. Turns out, it was just a glass tower. This," he gestured to the living room, to Ava, to the girls. "This is the only empire I want now." That night, Ava found a sketch tucked into her journal, a drawing Emily had made. It was their family, stick figures again, but this time, there were 5 of them. Ava, Emily, Grace, Jack, and a small figure between them all, with a heart drawn on its belly. She turned to Jack, puzzled. He looked up from the couch and smiled. "I was going to wait a few more weeks, but I guess Emily beat me to it." Ava blinked. "Wait, are you saying—" He nodded slowly, heart pounding. "You're going to be a big sister again." Emily gasped. Grace screamed. Ava just stared at him in disbelief. "You're serious?" Jack crossed the room, wrapped his arms around her. "We weren't planning it, but maybe the best things aren't planned." Her tears were quiet. "Happy scared. Are we ready for this?" Jack looked down at her, then at the daughters they already shared. "We're ready for anything. Together." The invitation wasn't printed on expensive cardstock. There was no calligraphy, no embossed gold leaf, no RSVP hotline, just a photo of Emily and Grace in flower crowns, holding up a hand-painted sign that said, "Mommy and Daddy Jack are getting married." Underneath, Saturday. Backyard. You're invited. And that was exactly how Jack and Ava wanted it. No spectacle. No media. Just the people who mattered. Just family. The day dawned with clear skies and the scent of lavender floating through the open kitchen window. Emily had woken first, bouncing on her bed in excitement. Grace followed, eyes still sleepy but sparkling. Ava stood in front of the mirror, a little overwhelmed. Her dress wasn't white. It was soft blue, the color Jack once said brought out the flecks in her eyes. She hadn't worn a gown in years, and certainly not for a reason like this. Jack was in the living room fumbling with his tie while Logan Pierce, his best man by default and closest friend by surprise, tried to help. "You know," Logan said, smirking, "for a guy who ran billion-dollar meetings, you're terrible at knots." Jack laughed. "That's because I never tied one that mattered. They didn't walk down an aisle. They walked through the back door, hand in hand, to the tune of laughter and the rustling leaves of the old oak tree. Emily sprinkled petals from a basket she made herself. Grace followed with a serious expression, holding a homemade ring pillow shaped like a heart. The backyard had been transformed with string lights, folding chairs, and paper lanterns the girls insisted on making. A banner stretched across the fence. 2 became 4, 4 became forever. Ava saw it and blinked back tears. The officiant was Mrs. Reynolds, their elderly neighbor, who had once babysat the girls and now held a license to perform weddings, just in case someone got romantic. She cleared her throat, smiling kindly. "We're gathered here not to witness perfection but partnership." Not fairy tales, but something far stronger. Second chances. Ava looked at Jack, his eyes steady, warm. Mrs. Reynolds turned to Ava. "Do you, Ava Carter, take Jack Callahan to be your partner, your family, your home, through all the mess, the joy, and the wonder?" Ava didn't hesitate. "I do." Then she turned to Jack. "Do you, Jack Callahan, take Ava Carter The woman who made you slow down, show up, and finally grow up, to be your forever? Jack's voice cracked. I do, with everything I have. Emily and Grace clapped before being told it wasn't time yet. The rings were simple. Ava's was silver, engraved inside with the words, "Always home." Jack's had 3 tiny stones hidden on the inside, 2 for the girls, 1 for the baby on the way. They kissed beneath the old tree while their daughters jumped up and down, chanting, "Mommy kissed Daddy Jack," until everyone laughed. There was no band, but Logan brought a Bluetooth speaker. And when the first notes of their favorite song floated through the air, Jack reached for Ava's hand. They danced slowly. Not like newlyweds, but like old souls who had finally come back to each other. You know, Jack whispered, I once thought I'd have the kind of wedding where you invite CEOs and serve champagne no one can pronounce. Ava rested her head on his shoulder. And now? He looked at Emily spinning in her dress, Grace feeding cake to the dog, Logan toasting with lemonade. Now I wouldn't trade this for anything. Later, as the sun dipped low and golden light bathed the backyard, Jack stood to make a toast. He held Ava's hand as he spoke. This family wasn't built in a straight line. We stumbled. We fought. We nearly lost each other, but we came back. Because love isn't found in grand gestures. It's in school drop-offs, burnt pancakes, midnight lullabies, forgiveness. He raised his glass. To Ava, who taught me that the greatest thing a man can do isn't build an empire. It's show up for the people who matter. To Emily and Grace, who made me want to be more than I was. And to our next chapter, messy, beautiful, and ours. They clinked glasses with lemonade, juice boxes, and one tired dog asleep under the table. That night, after the girls were tucked in and the last chair was folded away, Ava and Jack sat side by side on the porch swing. The stars were out. The house behind them was full of warmth and leftover cupcakes. Ava leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you think we're ready? Jack smiled, resting a hand on her belly. For a new baby? For all of it. Sleepless nights, chaos, more glitter glue. He nodded. We weren't ready 5 years ago, but we are now, because this time we're not alone. Ava reached for his hand. Then let's do it. Let's raise this wild, imperfect, incredible little tribe. Jack kissed her temple. Together. The contractions started just after midnight. At first, Ava thought it was false labor, just Braxton Hicks. But when she gripped the side of the bed with a sharp inhale, Jack sat up instantly. Hospital? He asked, already pulling on sweatpants. Ava nodded, face pale. It's time. They had rehearsed this moment. The go-bag was ready. The car seat was installed. Mrs. Reynolds was on speed dial to come stay with Emily and Grace. But no amount of planning prepares you for the moment your whole life shifts again. The drive was quiet. Ava clutched Jack's hand with every contraction, eyes closed, breath measured. Jack kept one hand on the wheel, one on her thigh. We're okay, he whispered. You're doing great. He'd never felt more helpless or more in awe. By the time they reached the hospital, the storm outside had arrived. Rain lashed the pavement. Thunder rolled across the Seattle skyline. Inside, the maternity ward was full. Nurses rushed. Lights flickered once, then steadied. Jack paced the waiting area in scrubs and paper booties while Ava was prepped. Then, finally, he was let in. Her hand found his the moment he entered. Don't leave. Not a chance. It was a long labor. Hours blurred into each other. Jack wiped her brow, whispered encouragement, held her through the worst of the pain. When the moment finally came, the world shrank to a single room, a single voice, the baby's first cry. High, clear, strong. Jack broke. Completely. He cut the cord with trembling hands, kissed Ava's forehead, and whispered over and over, "You did it. You did it." A girl.
7 pounds, 2 ounces, a patch of dark hair, tiny fists curled in toward her chest.
They named her Hope. Jack held her first. Sitting beside Ava's hospital bed, his daughter in his arms, he whispered, "You don't know this yet, Hope. But you've been prayed for, fought for, loved before you were even born." Ava turned her head, watching them both with eyes full of quiet wonder. "We've done this before," she said softly. "But this feels new," Jack smiled, "because it's ours from the beginning." The next morning, Emily and Grace came barreling into the hospital room with handmade cards and a stuffed giraffe. Grace peered over the bassinet, eyes wide. "She looks like a potato," Emily elbowed her. "She looks like a baby." Jack knelt between them. "She looks like your sister." "Want to hold her?" Grace hesitated. Emily nodded eagerly. Ava gently lifted Hope into Emily's arms. She sat very still, staring down at the tiny bundle. "Hi, Hope. I'm your big sister. I promise I'll always protect you." Jack looked at Ava. "We're raising warriors." But as day turned into night, something shifted. Hope, who had been feeding and sleeping well, began to fuss. A nurse came in, checked her vitals. Then another came. Then a doctor. Within minutes, the tone in the room changed. "Her breathing is a little irregular," the pediatrician said. "Could be nothing. Could be an infection or fluid in the lungs. We're going to run some tests." Ava's heart stopped. Jack held her hand tightly, masking his own fear. "Do what you need to do." Hope was wheeled out in a bassinet surrounded by machines. The door closed behind them. The silence that followed was unbearable. An hour passed, then 2. Emily and Grace were taken home with Mrs. Reynolds, full of questions Ava didn't have answers for. Jack stood by the window, hands clenched in his pockets. "This can't be happening again," he whispered. Ava looked up. "What do you mean?" He turned, eyes wet. "I never told you. My mother didn't just pass quietly. When I was born, I had a twin. He didn't make it past the first night." Ava's face went pale. "Jack, I can't lose her." "Not now. Not when I finally got this right." She stood crossing the room, wrapped her arms around him. "We don't know anything yet." "Hope's strong. She gets that from you." At 3:17 a.m., the pediatrician returned. Jack and Ava stood, bracing for the worst. "She's going to be okay." The doctor smiled. "There was fluid in her lungs, but we cleared it. No infection. She's breathing steadily now." Ava burst into tears. Jack slumped back into the chair, head in his hands. "Can we see her?" Ava asked. "She's already asking for you," the nurse joked. "She's in the NICU, but she's alert and loud." They were let in 2 at a time. Ava sat beside the incubator, hand through the tiny opening, resting gently on Hope's chest. Jack watched his daughter's chest rise and fall with mechanical consistency. Then Hope turned her head, and not much, but enough to make eye contact. And in that moment, Jack felt something shift inside him again. "She fought," he whispered. "Just like her dad," Ava said. "No," he replied. "Just like her mom." They stayed by her side all night. By sunrise, she was cleared for discharge from NICU. The doctors called it a miracle of timing and quick action. Ava called it grace. Jack called it hope, wrapped in 7 pounds of defiance. They brought Hope home 2 days later. Emily made a welcome home baby boss sign. Grace laid out blankets, stuffed animals, and a baby throne made of couch pillows. Jack carried Hope through the front door like treasure. Ava followed, her hand resting lightly on his back. For the first time in a long time, their house felt full in all the right ways. Full of laughter, full of love, full of life. It started with a letter, not a lawsuit, not the IRS. Not some dramatic knock at the door.
Just a plain white envelope slipped through the mail slot on a quiet Tuesday morning. Jack Callahan opened it while rocking baby Hope to sleep. He scanned the page, his eyes narrowing, then reading again, slower this time. When Ava walked into the kitchen, she saw the color drain from his face. "What is it?" she asked, immediately on alert. Jack held up the letter. "It's from the bank. They're calling in the loan on the old Callahan Global property. Apparently, when Charles Whitmore was arrested, they reclassified everything under a new risk level. But I thought that was settled when the charges were dropped." Jack nodded grimly. "It was, legally. But financially, they're still cleaning up the mess, and anything Charles touched now looks radioactive." He looked at Ava. "They want the balance paid in 60 days, or they'll liquidate the rest of my assets. That includes the condo I rented near here, and possibly my shares in Carter Wilson Tech." Ava sat down slowly, heart pounding. "Can we cover it?" Jack hesitated. "Not without pulling money out of the girls' college fund, or Hope's hospital fund, or selling this house." Ava's stomach turned. "No." "Not the house." Jack reached for her hand. "I'd never do that without talking to you. But we need a plan, and fast." That night, after the kids were in bed, they made coffee and pulled out every document they had. Bank statements, investment summaries, retirement plans. Ava suggested selling the unused second car. Jack considered consulting gigs. They talked options. They ran numbers. But at some point, Ava put her pen down and stared across the table. "This isn't like last time." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" "Last time, you tried to fix it all on your own. You lied, you carried the weight, you fell apart silently. But now, we're in this together." "And that changes everything." Jack smiled, exhausted but grateful. "Yeah, it does." Over the next few days, they got to work. Ava took on extra shifts at the community center's education program. Jack reached out to contacts in the startup world, not for charity, but for work. Within a week, he landed a short-term contract consulting for a small green energy firm trying to scale. It wasn't glamorous, the pay wasn't 7 figures, but it was honest, and it helped. Meanwhile, Emily and Grace noticed the changes too. No more weekend takeout. Movie nights at home instead of the theater, Mum and Dad whispering a little more than usual. One night, Emily pulled Ava aside. "Is Daddy in trouble again?" Ava knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. "No, sweetheart. But we're being careful. Grown-up careful. You know how when we want to buy something big, we save our allowance for a few weeks?" Emily nodded. "That's what Mommy and Daddy are doing right now." Grace, listening from the hallway, called out, "I can skip ballet this month." "It's okay." Ava's heart swelled. She pulled both girls into a hug. "No one's giving up anything. We're just learning how to be smart together." Even the neighbors stepped in. Mrs. Reynolds brought over casserole. Logan stopped by with legal tips on how to negotiate with the bank. Vanessa Whitmore sent a quiet check. Nothing dramatic, just enough to delay the pressure another 30 days. Jack tried to refuse. Vanessa replied with 4 words. "You saved me first." And through it all, something strange happened. They got closer. They played board games more. Cooked together, laughed at coupon clipping competitions, took long walks as a family instead of eating out. The girls started calling it adventure mode. Hope's giggles filled the house, and Ava realized they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Then, 3 weeks before the loan was due, Jack got an unexpected call. It was from a young entrepreneur he had once mentored, a woman named Rachel Huang, now running one of the fastest-growing AI ethics firms in the Pacific Northwest. "I heard about what happened with Charles," Rachel said. "I just launched a new initiative on rebuilding trust in tech, and I want you on the advisory board." Jack blinked. "Rachel, I haven't been in the game since—" "I know." "That's exactly why I want you. You've lived the consequences. You've rebuilt. You care. Come work with us. Remote. Flexible salary. Negotiable. It wasn't a lifeline. It was a future. By the time the 60-day window closed, they had enough. Not just to cover the loan, but to stabilize everything. No college funds touched, no house sold, no emergency savings drained. Just smart choices, a little help, a lot of love. That night, Jack and Ava sat on the porch swing again. Hope slept in a bassinet nearby. Emily and Grace were building a pillow fort in the living room. Ava leaned against Jack's shoulder. "You ever think maybe this was the real test?" Jack chuckled. "Losing everything." "Again?" "No. Learning how to not face it alone." Jack turned to her. "You saved me." "No," she whispered. "We saved each other." To my daughter, Hope. By the time you're old enough to read this, you may have already heard parts of our story. Maybe from your sisters, Emily, the brave one with a fierce heart, and Grace, the quiet storm with a poet's soul. Maybe from your mom, Ava, the woman who saved my life not once, but 100 different ways, just by standing in the light and refusing to let me disappear into the dark. But there are things I need you to hear. From me. Because one day, you'll face something hard, something that makes you feel small, lost, alone. And when that day comes, I want you to remember. You come from a family that fought its way back to each other. We didn't break. We bent, yes. We shattered for a while, but we put the pieces back together, with love, with grace, with open hands. There was a time, before you were born, when I thought I had everything. I ran a company, made headlines, drove the kind of cars that turned heads, stayed in hotel suites with more pillows than a human could ever need. And yet, I was empty. I didn't know I had 2 daughters who looked like sunrise. I didn't know the woman I loved had been carrying the weight of our past, alone, so I could build a future that didn't even include her. I didn't know I was a father. Until the day I stood at your grandmother Margaret's funeral and saw Ava again, holding hands with 2 girls who shared my eyes. That was the day everything started to change. And yes, I was scared. I made mistakes. I thought I had to handle it all myself. I was wrong. You'll hear stories about how I was framed by someone I trusted, how I almost lost everything, how I spent weeks behind bars, not knowing if I'd ever see your sisters again. But I need you to know, your mum never gave up on me. While the world questioned me, she fought for me. She and a man named Logan Pierce, a good man, unraveled the truth thread by thread. Because real love doesn't walk away when things get hard. It walks in, pulls up a chair, rolls up its sleeves and says, "Let's fix this." The day the judge cleared my name, I walked out into the sunlight and saw Ava with Emily and Grace waiting for me. I wasn't free because the law said so. I was free because they believed in who I could be, even when I didn't. When you were born, everything shifted again. Hope. We named you that because that's what you were, not a second chance. But a new beginning. You were the first Callahan to arrive into a world already full of love, not questions. But even you came with your own test. Those first hours in the NICU, they were the longest of my life. I remember sitting by your incubator, your tiny chest rising and falling, and I made a promise right there, that if you fought, I would too. And you did. Oh, you did. We brought you home to a house bursting at the seams, with noise, with chaos, with glitter glue on the walls and mismatched socks in the laundry. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And when hard times came again, because they always do, we didn't fall apart. We sold what we didn't need. We leaned on friends. We said no to luxuries and yes to dinner at home, movie nights on the couch, and a whole lot of peanut butter sandwiches. And you know what? We were richer than we'd ever been, because we had each other. So here's what I want you to remember, Hope.
Whether you're reading this at 8, 18, or 48, life will not go according to plan. It will reroute you. It will ask more of you than you think you have. People will leave. Things will break, but you'll be okay. Not because everything gets fixed, but because you'll learn to keep going anyway. You come from a long line of strong women. Your mum, your sisters, even Mrs. Reynolds, who still brings us lasagna every other Thursday like clockwork. And if you ever doubt yourself, come sit at the kitchen table. The same one where we once clipped coupons, cried over math homework, and celebrated every small win like it was the Super Bowl. That table is yours too. So is this family. And if one day you fall in love, I hope you choose someone like your mum. Someone who sees your flaws and still stays. Someone who walks beside you, not in front. Someone who doesn't need you to be perfect, just honest. And if that love gets hard, and it will, fight for it. Don't run, show up like we did. Like we always will. Hope. I started my life trying to be the man people respected. Then I tried being the man people feared. But in the end, the only title I care about is the one your sisters gave me. The one you'll grow up calling me too. Dad. And that's enough for me. Always has been. Always will be. Love, your father, Jack Callahan. Life rarely goes according to plan. We make mistakes. We lose people. We carry regrets that sit heavy on the heart. But Jack Callahan's story reminds us it's never too late to make things right. What matters most isn't wealth, success, or appearances. It's showing up, owning your past, fighting for your family, even when it's hard. Love doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. Many older Americans know this truth all too well. Life teaches us that the greatest victories often come not in youth, but in our second chances, when we choose to repair instead of replace, to forgive instead of forget. Jack didn't win back his family with grand gestures. He did it by being present, by listening. By learning to love not with words but with consistency. His story is a quiet reminder that redemption is possible, healing takes time, and the legacy we leave behind isn't what we build, but who we build it with. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to reconnect, to say, I'm sorry, or to try again, this story says, try anyway. You might just find something beautiful waiting on the other side,